sometimes when we're in that state and someone's like, oh, you should just meditate for 30 minutes, it's not going to happen. So distraction is a really good technique. Find something that's going to take your brain off of thinking about whatever you're thinking about, even if it's for 5 minutes.
Georgie, there's so much I want to talk to you about, but I think we've got to go right back to your birthright, because I think so much of what's followed has stemmed, and all of your motivation has come from what you went through in childhood. Are you okay for people, for watchers, for listeners who might not be familiar with you, just to give a quick overview of what your early years were like, so we can then follow your journey into where you are now?
Yeah, no, of course. So when I was 4, I had life-changing surgery, I would call it. They took out basically a ventricle in my heart. And they then, long story short, the advice was I could never exercise, really. It was sort of off the cards for me. Obviously, at 4 years old, you don't really think much of that. As I grew into my early teens and growing up, my whole family are incredibly sporty. My dad's an ex-pro golfer. And so I grew up watching how movement and how sports changed their lives and gave them so much purpose and happiness. Got to sixth form, which in the UK is about 18 years old, and thought enough's enough, really. So I don't advise this to anyone. I have to caveat every time I talk about it, going against your doctors. But I was like, I need to move my body. I was in a pretty dark mental spot at that point. And took up dance at school, much to everyone's horror, and just fell in love with learning how the body moved and how the body and mind are connected, like totally connected. Then spent the next 10 years sort of battling with my doctors and going for stress tests and heart tests and everything, and becoming a personal trainer at the same time. And now the advice is completely flipped on its head for people that have had my surgery. Like, you should move, you should be healthy. I've grown size in my heart. I've understood my body more, and my mind, and how they're both, how holistic wellness plays such a big role in my life. And I guess that's where my passion came in for wellness, and now for running ARVRA and wanting to help people all over the world, but most importantly, people like myself who came from rock bottom and want to find, their way of being well.
How hard was it growing up? Was there kind of a realization that all the other kids were doing sport, all the other kids were running around, and you were kind of like in cotton wool? Was that something you were aware of at a young age?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think I look back on it now. At the time, you kind of, because you're a child, for most of it, don't really understand what's going on, but it definitely had a massive impact on my life. Hate to sound cheesy, but I'm actually very grateful it happened. It's given me a lot of resilience and a lot of sort of understanding on how to listen to your own body. I'm not saying go against medicine or science, but there are often times where you can defy that, and anything's possible. So yeah, it was tough. I went through some patches that were pretty dark as a teenager, dealing with, well, one, the condition itself, and two, the fact that I felt like this sort of sick child on the sidelines. But now in a place where, strongest I've ever been, and much fitter than a lot of people around me. So
you think you've always been resilient, or it was the condition you went through and the subsequent years and years of dealing with it that built that? I'm trying to get a sense of whether or not it was always there or it's had to be developed.
That's difficult. That's such an interesting question. Thank you. I think a bit of both. I think I was born with tenacity. My dad would tell you that. I'm born with stubbornness, and I think that plays a part. But I think you grow through what you go through. I really believe in that. And if you've been through any trauma or anything, that's, we've all been through something. It's all relative to the person as well. That gives you resilience. That grows your resilience within you. I think that constantly being told that I couldn't do things, and that I was very fearful as a teenager. My body was just going to shut down if I was to do these things. So battling those mental thoughts gave me a lot of resilience now as an adult. So a bit of both.
I spoke to a guy called Ben Mudge recently who's got cystic fibrosis.
Yeah.
And he said that if lying down in the corner of a room, bawling his eyes out for 24 hours a day made him better, he'd do it, but it doesn't. And obviously, it sounds as though you've got a very similar philosophy there. Georgie, I'm interested in getting your advice for people who maybe are going through a difficult time and want to lie down and cry and don't really know where else to, what else to do or where else to turn. What's your advice for that resilience? Because it's such a powerful word. I think it does get thrown around a lot now, but what does it actually mean? How can somebody take those first and often the most important few steps?
Yeah. One is allow yourself to lie down and cry for as much as you want to do. Like, I think people think resilience is not showing vulnerability or, not showing suffering. And I think that a part of me being so resilient is I wear my heart on my sleeve, no pun intended. And I just, allow yourself to feel what you want to feel. And then I would suggest gratitude list is something that I've always done for years and years and years. There's always something positive to be learned out of trauma. And it may not seem it at the time. We all experience death or experience illness and things that are incredibly consuming in terms of dark emotions and trauma. But there's always a positive to be seen in these situations. And I know that that's me having grown that mentality, and it's all relative to the person. I understand that, but try and find something that's positive within your life. Secondly, find your way out of it. I wouldn't compare to anyone else's journey. So if someone has used exercise to get themselves out of a bad place, or they've gone and taken antidepressants, or they've gone to therapy, or they found a walking group, whatever it is, it doesn't mean that you have to follow that. Like, everyone is totally unique in their journey of resilience. Find something that distraction is a big word for me. If there's been a lot of trauma in my life for 30 years old, and distraction has always been a good tool for me. Surround yourself with people who have that positive energy. I use the phrase energy radiators rather than drainers. You don't want to surround yourself with drainers. And thirdly, find yourself a purpose that's not related to work or your life or that grief or that trauma that you're going through. Find yourself, I don't want to use the word hobby, I want to use the word purpose. Do something good, get up, help someone else that can help you. So yeah, that's my advice. And the biggest takeaway is it looks different on everyone.
But that's exactly the key. I think it's taking that pressure off of having to find a fix and find a fix straight away. It sounds as though for a lot of people there's going to be some trial and error. But I think the one thing that I kind of take in everything you've said there, I think so many people when dealing with a problem, and let's be honest, the world's a dark place right now. Like, it's quite hard to find sunbeams wherever you look. It's almost your sense of like not being a passenger in your life. And I think a lot of people get caught in that. There's nothing I can do about this. I'm just a passenger. But it sounds as though your philosophy is very much like, I'm in the driving seat and I control where I go and how fast I want to go.
Yeah.
Have I got that right?
Yeah, I think it takes time to learn that mentality. Like, I wasn't always like that. So for anyone listening who's going through a hard time and thinks that they're out of control, I get it. I've been there. There's been times in my life that I just literally don't know what's going on or who I am. I think with age, it comes easier, right? But just know that there is a place that you'll find yourself after going through whatever you're going through, where you know that you can't be knocked any further down than you've been knocked. And you've learned the tools and techniques to pull yourself out of dark places. And that's a really empowering place to be at. There's obviously going to be trauma throughout everyone's life. You can't get away from it. It's how you get back up again. And that's learned through experience, I think.
And that's it as well, especially for younger people who might be watching this. It's very easy for someone like me to say, get some perspective or look at hindsight, things work out. If you don't have that life experience and you don't have that perspective, that is something that you can't not only not do, you can't really even contemplate because you've not been there. What's your advice for, your 18 or 20-year-old self? Does it tally with what you're saying now? Or are there any specific tips or guidance you give to younger people?
I wish I'd given myself a bit more of a break. If I'm totally honest with you, I don't regret, you can't regret anything you've done as a teenager or felt as a teenager. Feel what you need to feel. or if you're younger. But I think at that age, it's really difficult to navigate things that are potentially abnormal. A lot of people go through abnormal things as a teenager, if you know what I mean, like I did. The situations that I was faced with weren't normal. And you can't talk to anyone about it because they don't understand it. No one relates to it. So you're kind of on your own. I was lucky enough to have very supportive family and friends, but you still are like, well, I'm on my own with this. So give yourself a bit of a break and try and give yourself time to navigate through it. There's not, I'm not a person who sits here and be like, do this, do this, do this, and it will fix you, because everyone's got a different thing and a different journey. But I would have said to myself back when I was 17, 18, when you're 30, this is going to be the best thing that's ever happened to you. So maybe take that as advice.
I think that's incredible advice. That's something I think probably the older generation or parents or relatives will say to young people, like, it'll be fine in the end, but it can sound almost dismissive, can't it?
No.
You don't understand, this is my unique situation. But I think your advice there is give yourself more time, give yourself a break. Don't put too much pressure on yourself to find a fix right away is invaluable.
Yeah, find ways to put yourself in the self-soothe system. So more often than not with trauma or sort of hard times and emotions, we try and fix it. We try and make ourselves feel better, when actually there's a step before that, and it's taking yourself out of this sort of fight or flight stress response. Put yourself in the self-soothing system before you then logically try and fix it. As humans, we want to fix. We're quite logical. And I just think that have a bath, go for a walk. There's lots of tiny, tiny things that you can do to help self-soothe your nervous system before you then try and fix the problem, especially if you've got major anxiety or you're struggling with grief or trauma. The one thing I'd focus on is just self-soothing yourself. Do little things to help bring that cortisol, adrenaline down.
You mentioned there, kind of looking back at your younger self. What about now if you're dealing or helping older adults who are dealing with younger people who are dealing with trauma? Because as I mentioned, that kind of, it'll be fine, don't worry about it, it'll be fine in 3 months. You're trying to be positive and trying to make somebody feel better. But like I said, it can be very dismissive or make it feel like you don't understand the root of someone's issues or problems. What is your advice to people who are maybe working or living with younger people with trauma? How can they do a better job of giving the support that's really needed?
Yeah, I would first change your language. I don't think anyone who is in the thick of it wants to hear it'll be all right, or just calm down, or you just need a holiday, or I think that's not helpful for anybody. I think being a great listener is really, really important. If someone wants to open up to you, sit there and listen. It's really hard as a young person to open up to older or adults. I found it really difficult. So I think being a good listener. Thirdly, if you're struggling as a parent of someone, let's say, who is depressed or anxious or is going through something really quite heavy, then find help. You can't do it on your own more often than not. I think my parents will vouch for that quite heavily, in terms of find your outlay and your support system that's external. And then try, and again, I'll use the word distraction, which I'm sure doctors are going to come at me for. I really like, sometimes when we're in that state and someone's like, oh, you should just meditate for 30 minutes. It's not going to happen. So distraction is a really good technique. Find something that's going to take your brain off of thinking about whatever you're thinking about, even if it's for 5 minutes. Give yourself that mind break and that bit of peace. So as someone who is within your circle, do something with that person to help distract, rather than try and fix. Again, I'll come back to it. Don't try and fix, try and distract and support.